Stolen Arts Festival for our 2 o'clock panel, which is Mustang Management and Bait Trapping. We have Rob Hart, who is, I've been dying for one panel, quite frankly. And we have Tim McGafferty, who's McGafferty. Don't mind me, it's been a wonderful day. And then we have Brenda Van Karen. So she's with Four Corners? National Mustangs in New Mexico. That's what Laura has educated me. So they're going to talk about Mustang management and bait trapping, and hopefully we'll get some answers with this panel. So Ron, I'm going to let you just introduce yourself, everybody do a little introduction, and then we'll start the conversation.
My name's Rock Hart, and manage a ranch.
He's also an inventor, so he's got a great conception that he's going to describe. My name is Brenda Van Karen. I'm a member of the National Mustang Association Colorado. We're a nonprofit 501c3 located in Cortez, Colorado.
Hi, my name is Tim Gastick, and I House of Farm. Several years ago, got some horses up there, and I was a member of the National Mustang Association Colorado, and I was a graduate and other things too.
So he's got a website called Nature of Natural, and Tim McGafferty was involved with NMACO. He was at least since 2018. So he just said he was a long-time member before that. But what he did for NMACO and the Mesa Verde National Park, under a general agreement with the park between NMACO and the park, was to design a step-by-step program just for the park so that it could bait trap horses at Mesa Verde. The park is not mandated to manage horses, and that means it cannot administer any kind of sterilization program, and it also is not there to feed or water the horses. And so the park had made a decision to preserve the antiquities and the ruins. They wanted to remove livestock, including trespass livestock, which are to them horses. And so even though the horses had been at Mesa Verde since well before 1906, when the park was turned into a national park by President Roosevelt, the park has made a decision, or had made a decision, that all of the horses needed to go. And so NMACO wanted to stand first in line to take title to the horses and place them either in sanctuary or go to doctors after the horses were trained, actually habituated further, and then gentled, and then trained, and then matched up with qualified doctors. And so the Mesa Verde Project is a program that's been going on since roughly 2018. The first gather was in 2020, I believe, with a single horse. And then in 2021, actually it was 2021 that the first horse was gathered. The COVID pandemic disrupted the process. And from there, he and Dale Ward, NMACO volunteers, worked with the park diligently to do the bait trapping. And I'll let Kim talk about the specificity of the project. But the following year, in 2022, there were 19 horses removed from the park that NMACO took title to and placed. Some at sanctuary, some through an habituation and fostering program, and then some were adopted out. In 2023, there were 18 horses removed from the park that NMACO had also placed at sanctuary or trained and placed with the doctors. In 2024, this last year, during the gathering season, there were 9 horses captured in Crater Canyon. There was a stallion and 6 mares and then 2 young ones, a yearling and a foal. And it's typical that any of the mares that are gathered off of Mesa Verde National Park are pregnant. And so that makes placing them challenging. So NMACO is trying to stick around and looking at what next year will hold. Bait trapping will resume in the park, more or less, maybe less, following the model that Tim McGafferty had designed. And it is the park that is leading the way for that effort. And we'll see how many horses are by my estimate, based on the numbers that we were given from the park, there could be 50 horses in the park, and it could actually be a bit higher because they can procreate. And so they're not staying ahead of the birth rate, and so that is an issue. And so the park needs to do a few things: continue shoring up its fences to prevent some of the migration, but also to get ahead. And if they really want the horses removed, then step up their hopefully bait trapping. But they can do what they wish in an environmental assessment of 2018. They can gather by horseback, men on horseback or people on horseback. They can also do helicopter gathering, and they can also, euthanize if they need to. And so what we're trying to do is assist them with the least worst option for the horses. And so that's kind of the summary about NMCO and its involvement in basically horses and bait trapping. We're a proponent of bait trapping. It's gentler. We have trainers who work with some of the horses. They notice a difference. Some people who have pointed out a difference between a horse that has been more gently gathered as being easier to work with, more trainable, more ready to accept some training, and easier to habituate with humans. And so that could be a controversial topic. Some people think that maybe it doesn't really matter. Maybe in the whole scheme of things, because of the great number of horses, there is huge supply. Right now, I would say there's less demand, but with some of the great training programs, the demand can increase, especially for adoptable trainable horses. And so that's my summary about NACO, and I would love to hear what these two gentlemen have to say. And so, Rob, how is it going with your contraption? Can you describe it? I'm wondering if you're going to move for facial recognition.
So yeah, the contraption. So on the ranch I manage, we couldn't get within 50 to 80, mostly 100 yards of any of these animals. And we had probably in excess of 200 horses on the ranch. The rangeland is horrible. I would say the majority of the rangeland is so vertical that trying to even track a horse would be impossible. And they were very sketchy. I liked the idea that my horses were sketchy. And I call them my horses because they're matchless. But I liked that they were running, that they were free and everything. And so, but there were times on certain years, and I've been managing since about 2007, that there were some areas there was hardly a blade of grass. And so I had the unfortunate opportunity to see the horses when their ribs and backbones were extremely exposed. In 2020 and 2021, we were literally having mares after giving birth that couldn't get up anymore. There was just no energy. Foals were being abandoned, and the coyotes were just having a heyday on that. It was really terrible. Prior to that time, though, I knew I had to start doing something. And so this contraption, we haven't really named it yet. It's kind of funny. Even this morning we were trying to come up with a name, and it's been forever trying to come up with it. But instead of moving towards the horse comes to us. If anything, it could best be described as a walk-up clinic, where there is a little square where we place some alfalfa. All it takes is one horse to learn it. He trains the other ones, or she trains the other ones. And next thing you know, they're eating. And that's when we realized that the triceps muscles were open for, always in place, let's put it that way. And we developed a system that can implant and read a microchip in the wild. I didn't realize how cool that was until the HSUS was surprised at what we were able to pull off. When they can get 18 reads, and we have 126,000 qualified reads on our animals. It's pretty incredible. On the other side, then we decided to do vaccination deliveries. And so on either side of the triceps, always the left side would be the microchip, and then the right side would always be the vaccines. This has been quite the challenge of keeping vaccines temperature controlled using solar power alone. And so in triple-digit weather, we can keep the vaccines controlled between 34 and 42 degrees. In the wintertime when it's freezing, a little heater comes on, it keeps it between 34 and 42 degrees. vaccines so we don't lose them or ruin our waste money. But we've been doing it now since 2019 is about when we started, and I'm seeing anywhere between a 15 to 20% decrease in our population. For the first time, I'm seeing elk in the ranch, and it's really surprising people. We even have Barbary sheep, which were unheard of. So the fact that other animals are coming in and there's enough grass to sustain them all is pretty incredible. So I'm optimistically calling it a success.
When you're mentioning the vaccination, exactly what is it that you're administering?
So we're administering Gonacon. Anytime I say that, I get this, you can almost hear the boos in the back of the audience, but we're forced to use Gonacon. The HSUS, who controls PZP, had told us that we were not allowed to administer PZP in any other muscle group but the rear muscle group per the label. I told them that just wasn't a safe thing for us to do, and plus the triceps muscle was acceptable even to their own scientific advisors. They were surprised by that. They checked in on that and they said, well, we still don't want to switch on that. So right now I am forced to use Gonacon. Having said that, we are, and I'm administering the Gonacon primarily to the older mares. These are mares that are anywhere between 10 and 15 years old. And in particular, my very first mare, I called her Bullseye because she has this great marking on the back of her back. It's a bullseye. And she's never looked healthier. I got to see her every year prior to that, and she was a skinny poor mare. And she now is a pretty fat and happy mare. So, and the band has stayed the entire time. Nothing has happened with the dynamics. And that's just one example. All of the other mares have looked healthy. We've not had one abscess in either the RFID or the vaccines, and I don't understand why. But we've, between the two, we're well over 150 deliveries.
So, does that, when you administer Gonacon to a mare, is it one shot per year, and then are they permanently sterilized, or can they give birth later?
So then this is from the USDA. With one application of Gonacon, the odds of them getting pregnant, I think, are about 60 to 70%. So it's not as, the efficacy isn't as great with just one. But with two, the efficacy is, I think, well over 95%. They are supposed to come back again after 2 years or so. But if you hit them with a third booster, like you've got the initial, then a booster, and then the third booster, the odds of shutting them down for anywhere from 7 years to on is pretty good. So the science, you know, and I'm not here to debate that Gonacon is the one vaccine that everyone should be going to. I don't think it is. If the HSUS was allowing me to use PZP, I could be hitting some of these younger mares, and it could be something that it would be. I could carry a cocktail of vaccines in these things. So I think if the politics weren't involved, we could be doing a better job with the management. But in essence, that's what we do.
Thank you. I have so many more questions, but Tim, I really would like you to share the plan that you put together for the park. And what I really appreciate about the way that when we've had interactions, you've got a methodical approach. It's very thoughtful, and you're reading the land. Certainly when you're reading a horse, before you're training that horse, or when you're approaching that horse, it's like you're tailoring it. You tailor that plan to the park. Can you talk about that?
Sure. I lose track of the years, but so Brandon seems to know the years we did these things. The park, the NMA kind of asked me to speak to the park. I had just moved back from Hawaii, and in Hawaii I trapped a lot of wild horses and cattle, and so I had some experience with it. So I went to the park and I said we can do there's several options there. There's this thing called low stress stock handling. I was trained in it by this guy Bud Williams who started it, and blah blah blah. And but if you're interested, I'll put something together. So I did, and so to Brenda's point, the wherever you're at, it depends on the terrain of how you're going to proceed. There's like one solution isn't good for everywhere. But basic principles of behavior are in place no matter where you are. So one of the things we wanted to do, as Brock said about his unnamed device, is that we want the animals to come in willingly, and all behavior comes from some form of motivation of mind, right? And so one of the things that's very, very sparse in the park is water. And water, as we know, is a primary reinforcer. You can go for quite a while without food, but you can't go very long without water. And so we started to put together a plan. The park, only because of the archaeological mandate for the park that Brenda brought up, the trap area could only be in a certain place, and the archaeologists told us what that was. And one of the big mistakes people make in bait trapping is they make it then too small. So, because you see a lot of them are little round pans, and they hope that whatever they put in there is enough motivation to go in there. But there's a novel aspect to that. These are new things. It's dangerous. I worked with Bermejo Ranch, which is one of the Ted Turner ranches, which also has wild horses. And when I went down there one time, I told them that, they set up these traps, and their traps were plenty big enough, but there was only one opening, and there was horses that wouldn't cross through that one opening. So you start out with putting the bait out first, right? And in our case, it was water, and they needed that, and we have film documentation of that. The first day the stud comes up, and they're thirsty, and he drinks, but all the mares are pretty far away. I think, I had a rangefinder, and I think the truth that he stood under was like 400 yards away. And he inspects everything, and he gets it done. And eventually, this not on the first day, and I had one panel I had put up, and that panel was there with a camera on it to mount the camera. And so our plan then was to add those panels as we went along, and as they came in. So after a day or two, the lead mare or the more dominant mares came in, and eventually took a drink, and pretty soon everybody's kind of coming in and drinking, and we started adding panels, right? But as you add panels, you see the stud comes in, and at first, until they understand, he goes all around these panels. I got a video of him. I think I got 2 or 3 panels up in addition to the ribbon. So there must only be like 3 panels, and he's like having done it. He's going around and around and around, and eventually he drinks. So those are the kind of things you're dealing with to not create those associations, those negative associations that in the end you don't want, because that's going to be your trap pen to trap all these horses. You want them to have that place to be, a friendly, safe place. And while you're doing this, of course, you're delivering your water and or bait, depending on what it motivates them at the time. And they start to associate you with that thing, right? So you're not really dangerous, you're just out there pouring water. And over time, the trap gets built, but I don't close it up and leave openings all around. So they have ingress and egress in several different places. They come, they go, they come, they go. And the goal there is to eventually make the last opening that comes in is going to be how they go out. Because the basic rule is they're going to want to leave in the way they came. They're going to go away, they're going to go back to where they think it was safe. So if they came in that way and then something happens, they're going to automatically decide to go out that way. Don't choose one of the other gates. So anyway, they're coming in, and then everybody, there was 4 bands. There was the main band, 1, 2. There was 4 bands in that canyon. And eventually, you know, we make the track, and they associate us with that. And eventually, we started to put out other things like Equine Senior worked well. They had plenty of feed out there that particular year. It wasn't like they were short of grass or anything, but alfalfa or something of higher value feeds, and of course Equine Senior is a lot more higher value than the range grass. But they don't just eat it right away. You know, they sniff it and everything. It takes a little while, but pretty soon, you know, they're coming and going, and you know, we set up a trap gate that was controlled by, you know, like a fob, and you can use, there is one that you can tie that to a cell phone, but there was no cell phone service down there, so that wouldn't work. We had to be somewhere within about a half a mile. I mean, we checked it pretty far away. And so then, you know, they come in, and eventually we have a video of the bands going and taking turns going in for the water. And of course, that wasn't trained, they just did that on their own, right? The most dominant band, which was the biggest band, would go in first, they drink, and then they leave. And then you see them, they just walk right out. Next band comes in, they drink, walk right out. Then the other band will drink and just walk right out. And and one of the goals of that system was we tried to make sort of a vertically integrated thing that if we could trap by bands, the trainer that we were going to use, Patricia Barlow, said that in her experience, every time she got a band, it trained easier than if they were friendly, that they'll say whatever for all of those social reasons, better than say just getting a bunch of horses that came, you know, from the BLM or somewhere that were just randomly put together. So that was one of the ideas, we were going to track by band and then send them off to people that would train them like her by band. And we did that. And they, you know, got so that you could be in a trap with them. You know, you were right next to them, but they weren't tame. I mean, but they didn't view you as a threat, and that's really what we wanted, not to associate people with the threat. But later on, when Patricia had them, and she put together a YouTube channel that I think is called How to Track Wild Horses, and so there's videos on there if you wanted to see them about that. She said they were the easiest horses to train she had. And other trainers, Michelle was one of the trainers they found. She also thought they were like, but they trusted people universally. It wasn't like, anyone could just kind of walk up, oh, that's a person, the person's okay. As opposed to sometimes, like that film that we made there's a Mustang on it, and he did not trust people universally. And to go over that, train the horse better, so that he could have a good life. You know, I couldn't just give him away to somebody because, you know, he might just look at him. He's way better now. But anyway, these horses were like that, and we tracked them, and we used his methods when we took them, we loaded them up and took them to a holding facility, and we spent 2 days. And so there was like a timeline there. The park was shutting down, and we tracked them in the last like week or something. And my friend Whit came, and he also had studied with Bud Williams, and he had put on some classes because he had a nice class that he put on, and he put it on for the park. So the park knew these methods, these what we call low stress stock. And so we worked with those horses in that area to teach them how to come out, that you could sort them at a gate, you could stop some and let some through the alleyway, and taught them how to go through the chute, because on 2 days from there, on the 3rd day, the vet was coming, and we were going to have to process all those horses through the chute. And they, you know, they went through the chute, they went out, and every time they'd go through there, we would, you know, take them to hay or something, and just, you know, so every time, you know, they got a reward, if you will, or a reinforcement, in other words. So on the day, you know, we processed them, like whatever there was that day, 18, I think we tracked another 4 right after that. And we came and we did all that, and they got shipped out, and it worked out fairly well. But it was as Brenda said, it was a process that we went through systematically, not just making certain simple mistakes of not putting up the trap first, and, you know, putting the bait out first, and in that case it was pretty easy because they needed water. But in other places you have to be maybe more creative, but it still is a viable way. And then, you know, in that way, when those bands come in and out like that, once they learn that, it would be a way that, say, Rock's device, you could, you know, they would easily just come in and eat and drink and, you know, whatever you wanted to do with them. I don't know how you combine them, but, you know, they're just being creative. Certainly, they're not tame. I mean, you can't walk up to them and pet them or anything like that. What they do, they did associate people not negatively, and that was probably, and that's what they have to have. I mean, I suppose if they were all going to a sanctuary, it really wouldn't matter. But even some sanctuaries, I don't know which ones that they're going to, but even some sanctuaries have horses come in and trim their feet or do something with them. So at some point they have to be handled, and if they understand that, it's a way less stressful on them and everyone involved, and no one got hurt.
Thank you. So thanks to Tim's efforts and his enlisting Whitney's support and working with the park, 47 horses have been gathered and moved from Mesa Verde safely. Unfortunately, he's not as involved, and we miss that, because the methodical approach is really good. For the park personnel, there are 2 park members or park employees who are dedicated to the effort. And my thought is they might need to put more resources to the process of horse removal. But they would like to simply have the horses off the park. So we're staying in touch, we're staying involved, we're going to see what is possible. What's interesting when I'm listening to Rock and Tim, I'm thinking about what are the next steps. And so, for example, how are you going to commercialize or make more marketable your contraption? I'm going to hit on a sensitive topic. There was a potential set of contracts you had with a client, and you hit a roadblock. And I imagine, you know, and that's kind of the business of commercializing anything, bringing something to market after you've
So there was a deep depression after going through years of work, and then finally someone's interested and they recognize, like what Tim was talking about, horses do what they do and they learn. And so we have figured out how to create a non-threatening walk-up clinic where they literally come up and get their own microchip. Literally within 10 seconds, they were coming back to eat again. They didn't even know they had been microchipped. Some of the mares that did get the vaccine, a little more painful because there's something going in them a little bit more powerfully, but typically within the next 10 minutes, they were right back again. So, you know, it's super humane. That ability to hit and or to attract in a lot of animals and be able to identify them and send vaccines is very attractive. What really gets in the way of that is the politics. And I do believe there's times that I'm fighting some other contractors that maybe have lobby money or something. We don't. We're a pretty broke little company. We basically made something that no one else has ever done in the world in our garages. And in fact, I had some folks from CSU saying, well, you know, I wish we kind of had your budget because we could have done stuff. I'm like, you have no clue what we've made this stuff off of. But our next step is basically just what I'm doing here. It's grassroots. And it's basically, the one thing I can tell you is this is probably the most humane system in the world. In fact, I'll even argue that it's more humane than someone doing it by their hand. Because as soon as a human is present, there's a certain amount of tension in that animal. And so when literally they've been vaccinated within less than 1.3 seconds, and by the time they back up, they're not even sure what happened, and they come right back again. I would challenge anybody to do a vaccine like that and then see if that animal will come close to you again. So there's something with what Tim was talking about. The animals, the horses, will react to something that they don't feel there's a danger to. And if they feel safe coming in and going out again, you're going to get a bunch of numbers. And that's basically why, you know, on the ranch, you know, I've been able to vaccinate so many horses remotely. The cool thing about it is, as opposed to being with a fob, we utilize Starlink, and I literally microchipped a horse and vaccinated a horse from over 3,000 miles away in Hawaii. So in the end, we're getting ready to make it automatic. So when the microchip reads, a booster is automatically sent, so I don't have to be there at 3 a.m. waiting for that horse to come in. So the practicality of it now is better than ever. And of course, as you probably learned, some bands eat up all the food, and so we have had to deal with alpha bands, and we simply put a little, like a swimming pool cover door on it, and that movement alone is usually enough to make them run off, and then the next beta band can come in. The cool thing is they still come back. Even after that movement of action. In fact, I had horses last night. I forgot to close the door. And some previously microchipped horses had come in that I had already scared away. And there they are again. We're reading their chips. I must have had, I think, up to 50 RFID reads last night. So yeah, it's doing it in the most humane, ergonomically, non-threatening way as possible. Like what you were talking about, building that. Some of the horses have figured out that I'm the one leaving the little breadcrumbs out there, and that they'll kind of come in at a distance and they'll eat and kind of back up and always keep an eye on it. It's cute as hell, but it's once they kind of recognize that you're not the danger, you know, then you have, I don't want to call it an upper hand, but basically what you're doing is you're now working with that animal and their flight instinct.
Wonderful. It sounds like this is opportunity to learn more and also collect some good data. You have a database that you manage. You've got microchips. You've got visits to the site. And I know you even heard some people suggesting, well, why not put a collar on and track them so that you can see the migratory patterns through the year. They do have migratory patterns, and actually, Mesa Verde's wildlife biologist had told me that the particular site they're tackling this next spring is, what he has seen in the past is, there are several bands that will come over into that area, they'll congregate and spend a lot of time loitering. And when I visited the park the first time this year, I saw evidence of them rolling around, I saw the stud piles, and so it looked like they were there. What attracted them to that site was the water, and you know that. You're also familiar with this particular site. And so what the biologist had said was that then after that, as the weather gets warmer, then they start to disperse. And they'll go off in their bands, and they may not return for a while. And so, and they get, then they lose track of them in the park. And so they will do some surveillance next year. So they're going to do that by airplane, I believe. And they're going to see where are the horses, and that is sort of preliminary to deciding which method to go to next. They may have an idea. We would like them to stick with bait trapping. If they were to stick with bait trapping, Tim, what do you think they should do? What could be done? You're familiar with that park. It's really rugged terrain, steep canyons, and things like that.
Well, and that's Soda Canyon, and there's no way to get bait down into there. It is rugged, really rugged. You have to lure them out, right? You have to lure them out somehow, and luring them out the water and control that. That's an overflow. It comes out of when they open the hotel. There's a pond there that is, I don't know how it works, you know, the water and the overflow from the sewage or whatever. But there's an overflow that when that pond is full or whatever, it dumps right not far away from that. So you'd have to control that somehow, and then maybe pipe it into a place where you wanted it to go. It would take a little effort, probably a tank and a solar pump and something. But probably not a whole lot of expense. You know, those 5,000 gallon tanks aren't that expensive. And solar pumps work pretty well. PVC pipe is relatively cheap. So it's possible to start luring them out, but the key to that is you got to start. It doesn't just happen overnight. You have to start, you have to learn, as I said, they do learn, and they feel safe, they'll go there, and then you can manage them or, put your trap up wherever the archaeologists have said in that particular place. But you have to get way ahead of it. You have to go out there and start doing this. And it's not like something that's onerously difficult, but it's something you have to do regularly. You have to go out early in the year, set it up, make sure your infrastructure is in place, and make sure it works, and monitor it as Rock is doing in any number of ways. But that's another thing, to monitor those cameras, see where they're going and everything, and then whatever adjustments you need to make, you make those adjustments, and then they would come out eventually, and you might end up with a few that don't, but eventually you could teach the majority of them to come out. Yeah.
Nice. Well, thanks. I think we're talked out a little bit.
Well, I'd like to hear from Lockhart a little bit about the advantages this would have for the horses in the future to keep them on the range. And, what happens, to the horses that get removed from the range, how this would be a benefit for them, the tool.
So we're not removing any horses. One of the aspects is we're just managing them right where they're at. And as Tim was talking, this is really cool. There's a migration that occurs. And horses that I was seeing, like in 2019, in early 2020 disappeared. And I didn't see them for a couple of years. And then, lo and behold, the microchip reads. The cool thing about the data is it just reads. The data is the data. I can't change it. It's awesome. And I'm looking at the microchip and I'm going, that looks familiar. And so then I look it up and I'm going, oh my gosh, that's Surfer Dude. I used to name these horses. They have long numbers, but you know, names are a little funner. And it was so cool because you know, we hadn't seen this horse for years, and there it is. And so the cool thing is that once, as Tim was talking, once there's this learned behavior, often it is the alpha. I've also seen alpha mares teach a band. Sometimes some of the stallions are a little hesitant, but if that mare is hungry, she's going to eat. And so then often she creates a little bit of jealousy, and then the other ones learn that, hey, this is pretty good. But it's so cool that once they've learned, like last night, I did put out, often I'll put out little breadcrumbs, I'll call it, where I'll put it out there a little bit, let them get used to the noises. And what would be my noises? There's tiny little fans that will go off to blow off the heat if there's any heat within the vaccination system. And sometimes that little slight noise is enough to kind of get them, but as soon as they're eating, they realize nothing's hurting. And then they put their head up and they see the mother load, and they go, oh my, that's a lot more than what's down here. And forgive me as I paraphrase, but you watch them, and then once they've learned it, it's learned. So like for instance, we had horses last night. One of them was one that had been a 2019 horse. And actually I hadn't seen him in about 4 or 5 months, and he showed up last night.
That's fantastic. So I'm curious about all of the applications, all of the study, and the next steps. And so does anyone else, I love that question.
The only other question I might want, before you go into that next step that you're talking about, I'm so excited to hear about, is the benefits of, I know a lot of people don't want to say PCP, and they don't want to say Donicon, but we've got to say those terms. And what are the benefits for using a diverse tool for these horses, and what are the benefits in the health of the horses in using Donicon with the older horses?
So the benefits is that they can stay on the range. They don't need to be rounded up, vaccinated, and then released. So like for instance, next time it goes time to round up these horses, it's going to be a little tougher. They're going to learn. And these animals do learn that once they've been rounded up once, they don't want to go through this ever again. So rounding up that animal a second time to administer a booster is going to be next to a nightmare to impossible. If that animal will come up on its own, and you can get that done on its own, and I've proven time and time again that you can do this routinely, you're spending, like for instance with the BLM cost $1,000 to $3,000 per animal, we're pennies compared to that. And so, and for a ranch that, it may be land rich but they're cash poor, we can't even capture horses. We don't even have the facilities to do it. So the benefit is placing some of these out there. I only have one unit out there right now, and I've done well over half of the entire herd. And that is at one watering hole. As they migrate through, it gets them. So the benefits are that you never have to touch that animal. And between PZP and Donicon, PZP has its advantages because that animal now can breed again sooner. And so for your younger mares, I would suggest that. Donicon, on the other hand, I would argue that would be much more humane because you're not having to hit that animal again. Once you've done your initial, your booster, and then your third booster maybe 2-3 years later, it's finished. And you never have to bother that poor mare again. And in addition, there are some arguments between PZP, estrus still does occur, and that mare is still being mounted, she's still being chased, but with Donicon, it's shut down. So there are pros and cons on both. If I had the perfect world, and throw the politics out the window, we would be using a cocktail of both vaccines. Because it's not about Pepsi or Coca-Cola, or Russia or the United States. which has happened with the politics, you can use whatever vaccine is best for that animal. And so like in our system, we could put a cocktail of vaccines in there and say, okay, this is an older mare, let's give her Donacon. This is a younger mare, let's give her PCP. Or let's leave her alone. Let's contribute to that DNA. And so I think that's very important that if you're going to contribute to the herd, you manage it. You don't exterminate it. And unfortunately, I think sometimes that's what happens when you say the term Donacon, you're out to kill animals and get rid of them. That's not the case. We love them. And as the ranch owners do as well.
Well, so I've got a question about that, as the question flies out of my head. I was thinking about too many different things. Have you gotten to the point where you can actually pull some hair samples?
That would be really easy. So we can. So like for instance, when using a blunt dart with a little bit of sticky on the end of it, you would basically do the exact same thing we do. And you could, well, you're microchipping the horse, you could also be taking a hair sample that would be left on that sticky from the blunt dart. And so all of our darts don't run off, just so you know, they don't run off the horses. They're all tethered to the system. While that's why it's important with 1.5 seconds we've got to administer that vaccine. So when that dart, the blunt dart hit the animal, we've obtained hair samples that we can use.
And how that is important is the idea of genetic testing, and then actual further management, so that the horses are not being managed to extinction, especially particular genetic material. And so hopefully we talk more about that with the genetics panel tomorrow as well. So I'm done. I don't know if I can add anything else or ask any more questions.
We're just gonna round it up as where are we going now? No,
One thing I want to say is that mixing the bands is problematic in terms of when you shove bands together, they don't accept them and yet there's displaced behavior. That's where you get a lot of fighting. I made the big mistake. There was a second band that we tracked, and there was a young foreman in here. There was the big band, and it was going to shift, and then all the other horses were going to go to the other ones except him. Were going to go, and I let that. I put the yearling with the other band. And I thought, well, you know, he's a young horse. They'll let him in. He's not, you know, a stud or anything like that. They never did. And they never did, even after maybe a year. And Patricia had to separate them because they were always on lighting and all sorts of things. So when you put those bands together, you start to get that fractious, displaced behavior that, you know, they're afraid, other people essentially lead you up, and you get problems. You start to get, you know, arbitrary horses, injured horses. Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more thing that did occur to me. You had mentioned something about horses becoming track-wise and not wanting to be trapped again. And I think it depends on how they were trapped. And so what's interesting is, because of your program, some of the horses that have become habituated to trapping, they were easier to trap later. That's why the 47 all gathered. And so they were acclimated to that, and they had that positive association. So they didn't run away from being entrapped or encircled by animals again. And so that really is a more gentle approach. I think that's just an interesting distinction to make.
I think the top of the city, so the net that they push, yeah, like helicopter, so they voluntarily came in. We weren't making them. And they voluntarily came in while you were standing in the trap. From here to there, easily, you could stand in the horse because they didn't bother you. We didn't try to do anything. Didn't try to push them or do anything. We were just this thing that put out water. So yeah, I it's a difference between they come to you or you decide to make them do something with chasing